the most passionate thing that I've ever worked on. And I think the members of our team are very passionate about really, as you'll see, hopefully coming to a viable treatment for at least two major forms of congenital ichthyosis, X-linked, and then 9 different genetic forms of lamellar disease. And Jess Raiz is our VP of Operations. Jess?
Yeah, hi, good evening. Thanks for joining us tonight. It's our pleasure to be here to talk to you a little bit about the ASCEND study. As Alan mentioned, my name is Jessica Raiz, and I am the Vice President for Program Management and Clinical Operations, which is a long title, simply to say I'm responsible for keeping the train on the tracks, essentially, and making sure that not only can we answer questions from patients like yourselves, but those study participants, once they're on the study, to ensure that they have everything that they need to feel comfortable, and that all of the physicians working on the study have everything that they need as well. So thanks for being here tonight, and hopefully we can shed some light on the program and how we hope that to be able to benefit the ichthyosis community.
So again, good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever time zone you're in. We want to thank Chris and the members of the First Executive Board for encouraging us to provide this presentation. We're very happy to show you the progress that has been made so far. And most everything that I'm going to show you is published data or our published data. And so if you're interested in any of the manuscripts or the posters or the abstracts, please just shoot us an email or shoot an email to Chris, and I'm sure she can get in contact with us, and we'll be happy to share a lot of that information with you. I'm sure that many of you or your family members have heard about or used retinoids in treatment of your ichthyosis. Retinoids, as you know, can be natural derivatives of vitamin A, or it can be chemically created. Isotretinoin, for example, is a fully naturally found retinoid. It's pretty much found in everybody. Everybody on this call has isotretinoin in their bloodstream right now, as long as they've eaten things like carrots or sweet potatoes, any really of the foods in our diets that have lots of vitamin A, because it's a natural breakdown product of vitamin A. How retinoids work in acne, for example, which is the biggest area where they are used, and certainly in congenital ichthyosis, is really not still understood. But there is clear evidence going back over 40 years that retinoids do work. TMB-001, which is the compound we're talking about today, is a unique form of isotretinoin that doesn't have to be taken by mouth, but is rather applied as an ointment directly on the areas of ichthyosis, with the exception of, so far, the face and the head, the back and the hands, and the groin area. And that's predominantly because, as a group, all topical retinoids applied to the skin cause burning and stinging early on. And in most cases, the burning and stinging resolves. It's just those areas I mentioned have very, very thin skin. And so the burning and stinging initially may be a little bit worse, and may, in fact, cause people to stop using it. So that's one of the things that we're going to be looking into in the future, is how to be able to treat those other areas of the body. In any event, we attempt to think that of all the retinoids, the best choice to use directly on the skin is isotretinoin, for the reasons outlined on this slide. Even when it's taken orally and is absorbed into the bloodstream, it is usually out of the body within a week. Many other retinoids, such as acitretin, which is actually the only approved drug in the EU for the treatment of ichthyosis, will actually stay in your blood or in your tissues actually for 2 or 3 years. And you can imagine that this becomes a major issue in women of childbearing age who have ichthyosis, who want to get pregnant and don't want to wait 2 to 3 years. Whereas the use of isotretinoin is out of the body very quickly, or reasonably quickly, and particularly the topical, as you'll see, almost nothing gets absorbed. As a drug, isotretinoin is broken down, whether in the skin or in the bloodstream, into 4 other drugs, whereas most other retinoids only get broken down to 1 or 2 additional drugs. In a disease where we know retinoids work, but are really unsure of how they work, to steal a sports analogy, isotretinoin actually allows more shots on goal, in a sense, more and different ways for the drug to work. Additionally, isotretinoin appears to be better tolerated than other retinoids. But what separates TMB-001 from, say, tazarotene or trifarotene is the vehicle or the ointment part of the treatment, not the drug part. Our ointment has no alcohol in it, and so it should reduce stinging, but it also maintains emollient qualities. For example, in the current phase 3 ASCEND trial, once patients get past the first 3 weeks of treatment, where we sort of mandate emollients be added on, for the rest of the trial, patients no longer use any additional emollients, don't use any keratolytics. The only thing they use is the TMB-001 or the vehicle by itself. Because the ointment part of TMB-001 is designed to keep most of the isotretinoin in the skin, that also theoretically, and you'll see, reduces the risk and incidence of many of the side effects you may have heard of or even heard of at the last meeting with Dr. Millstone. So we have finished 2 small phase 2 or early trials to figure out whether TMB-001 works and what the right dose is. And Aditya was kind enough to participate, not in this one, but in the next 2 trials that we're going to discuss. In this very early trial, patients 12 years of age and older apply one of 2 different concentrations, what we're calling a high dose and a medium dose, or a medium dose, I should say, to one arm or leg, and just the ointment part without isotretinoin was applied to the opposite matching arm or leg. And so you can see on the left the before pictures, and on the right you see the after pictures after only 8 weeks. So you can see the treated upper arm with the TMB-001 is much less scaly, while the ointment alone arm pretty much hasn't changed very much. And these are data published. The lead author was Dr. Paller, and it's in the Journal of the American Academy of Dermatology. We then proceeded in the second trial and changed the design to now include children as young as 9. And we now mandated that subjects apply the drug to 10 to 90% of their total body surface area. And to put that in perspective, if you applied TMB-001 to your entire leg, just your leg, that would be about 20% of your body surface area. So hopefully that puts it into some context. You could apply it to everything but the areas that I discussed, or a half a leg if you wanted to. So it's a very wide amount of disease that patients have to have. We also changed the doses to include an even lower dose now, as you can see, of 0.05%. And we judged whether the drug or ointment alone worked by looking at how many patients showed at least a 2-point improvement or a 50% improvement from baseline in their scaling scores. And I'll show you some standard scales on the next few slides, just to put this into perspective. So this slide is pretty straightforward. For the sake of tonight's discussion, we will say that the pictures you see here apply to all of the ways that skin severity and ichthyosis are measured or tested. All the way on the right, you can see a person with a score of 4. So the scale goes from 0 to 4, with 4 being the worst. This person has obviously thick scales, quite a number of fissures, etc. But as you can see, as you go from 4 to 3 to 2 to 1, the skin starts to appear clearer. Less scaling, smaller scales. Of course, the goal is always to get to a score of 0, which would then make the skin completely clear. So please keep these pictures in your mind's eye when we start to talk about some of the results and look at some of the other pictures that I'm going to show you. This is a very similar exercise looking at the legs, but the same concepts. The worst appearance is a 4, completely clear is a 0, and there are grades in between. So in the second trial I showed you, and in the current phase 3 trial, you had to have disease of a severity score of at least 3 or 4 to be entered into the trial. And to be considered a responder to treatment, you had to improve by 2 grades or more. So you would have to go from a 4 to a 2, or a 3 to a 1, or a 4 or 3 to a 0. We had patients who did that as well. So again, please keep these images in mind as we go through some of this. In a previous advisory board we conducted with FIRST, many families told us that even a 1-point improvement, so going from 4 to 3 or even 3 to 2, for example, would be considered progress by some of those families. And we'd be interested to know if you would think the same, if going from a 4 to a 3 or a 3 to a 2 would make you happy. You can answer now, or we can talk about it later. In any event, these are the results from the trial. In this second trial, where the patients were able to apply the ointment maximally twice a day, every day for 12 weeks, what we found was that the lower dose, the dark blue bars, pretty much worked in all patients, regardless of whether they were X-linked or ARCI. So these are patients, again, who go from moderate to severe when they start to a mild, clear, or almost clear after 12 weeks. The ointment itself really only works in a small number of X-linked subjects. You can see that the ointment itself doesn't work in patients with lamellar disease. We also saw that the time to get to this level of clearance was about 1 to 2 months faster than just using the ointment alone. In the next 3 slides, I'll show some photos from subjects in this trial. So you can see 2 subjects here. And again, I don't need to give a lot of commentary between these 2 subjects. You can see certainly the subject on the left has a lot less scaling. The subject on the right, again, a lot less scaling. The fissures that you see are really not real fissures. They're just the way the plaques grow. And you can see that there's clear improvement there. Here's another 21-year-old male. Again, some improvement, probably not as good as the last patient, but some improvement. And a final patient, a final woman who has a pretty good response, as you can see, looking at the arm, the breasts, the upper chest, and the back in terms of before and after. And this is, again, after applying it twice a day, pretty much every day for 12 weeks. So this is where we are now. We are currently trying to finish the final step, which is the phase 3 trial, which is currently being conducted in the United States, Canada, and 3 countries in Europe. We can show, the goal is obviously to take everything I've already shown you, add in these data so that we can take these to the health authorities and get the drug approved for use. This is a map of where the sites are, particularly in the United States, but also in Europe and Canada. We would be more than happy to go over any details at the end of the presentation about the sites, locations, any interest that you might have in terms of knowing where these sites were. But you can see that they're fairly well dispersed within the Midwest and the East, and somewhat less in the West Coast and other parts of the Midwest. As similar to the previous trial, here we are studying the low dose alone of TMB-001 in children as young as 6. And just to remind you, No retinoid in the world is approved to be used in children this young. So this in and of itself would be a remarkable improvement just for medicine, to be able to actively and in an approved way administer isotretinoin to children as young as 6. What differs here is that we only ask subjects to apply the ointment 3 times, once a day for 3 weeks, along with a mandatory emollient, which in this case is Cetaphil, or something similar if patients can't tolerate Cetaphil, just to hopefully get the skin acclimated for those 3 weeks, reduce the burning and stinging as much as possible. And then subjects go on to apply the drug or the ointment alone twice a day for an additional 9 weeks. At week 12, or 3 months, based on the criteria in the protocol, subjects can then get switched back to once a day for the next 12 weeks or continue twice a day. This approach allows us to see, first of all, if some people take more than 12 weeks to get clear, because there are no studies yet available that say, for some people, it might take 24 weeks to get nearly clear, because all of the studies that have been done so far pretty much only go on for 12 weeks. It also will allow us to help patients and physicians in the long term, because we should be able to tell whether a once-a-day maintenance regimen is best for you or twice-a-day maintenance regimen is best, and move on from there. But similar to the last trial, we're looking at the proportion of subjects here who have at least a 2-point improvement in scaling and fissuring when looking at the low dose of TMB-001 versus the ointment component alone. The trial is still ongoing, so I can't really show you whether the drug works or not because I don't know. But again, we will show you some photos. These are blinded photos, so again, we don't know whether any of these subjects are receiving TMB-001 or just the ointment without isotretinoin. You'll see photos from about 4 patients at all sorts of different time points. So this is the first subject, as you can see, who has a fair amount of very thick scaling on the back of the calf that appears, again, at least in these photographs, to be improved, certainly less dark. Here, it's important to focus on the ankle, and the top of the foot in terms of the amount of improvement that you see. Here you can see the shin area. Again, hard to tell in the photographs how much improvement there is. Again, we don't know what these scores are. We're not allowed to look at them, but this is after 6 months, not after 3 months. A similar subject looking at the back of the calf before and after. You can see on the large part of the muscle of the calf, there appears to be good amount of clearing. Towards the lower part of the calf, I think you can still see some scaling. Here's another patient with fairly significant scaling at baseline, and within 12 weeks, a lot of those scales appear to be gone. A similar subject at 12 weeks with a fair amount of dry, flaky, scaly skin on the calf and improvement by 12 weeks. And again, here's another subject with a fairly significant amount of thick scales on the top of the foot and the ankle, which appear to be significantly reduced. Again, pictures may not be telling the whole story. That's why we have the patients come into the offices at 12 weeks and for the investigators to judge. But certainly, photographically, these subjects appear to be doing better. One of the key issues, as I mentioned earlier, is the less retinoid one has in their system, the better the chance that one can avoid the major side effects as listed here of isotretinoin and pretty much all retinoids. So that as part of the development program for the FDA, we took patients who had to apply TMB-001, the drug itself, twice a day, basically for their entire body, 75 to 90% of their body. And then we check their blood levels of isotretinoin and some of the breakdown products. That is how much drug got absorbed. This was then compared to 15 adult volunteers who didn't have ichthyosis, who took a single dose of 80 milligrams of oral isotretinoin and then had their blood levels checked to see how much isotretinoin and breakdown products they had. And depending on which way you want to look at it, which measurement you choose, the highest concentration, the total exposure, it is abundantly clear based on this experiment that the TMB-001 treatment affords 40 to 400 times lower amounts of isotretinoin in the blood over a 14-day period compared to a single 80 milligram dose of oral isotretinoin. So you get 40 to 400 times less applying this drug for 14 days than you do taking one 80 milligram tablet. And we presented these data as well. In case you don't believe that you can achieve good results with really low serum concentrations, this is a 12-year-old young man who was in both our phase 2B and in the maximal use study. The before photos are the ones in the left panels or the top panels, and the after are in the right panels or the below panels. And this young man had a peak concentration of 5. If you or I had our blood drawn, it would basically be somewhere around 1. If you got an 80 milligram dose, it would be about 800 to 1,000. And so we're getting significant clearance, it appears. And we know this young man got the drug with a total serum concentration of 5, not 800, not 1,000, not 10,000, but 5. So as you might expect, when we look at the safety profile, in fact, in the main trial, and the 82 is actually an old number. We're closer to 90 at this point. But what we can say is approximately 60% of the subjects who are in that part of the trial have absolutely no side effect, no skin burning, no skin irritation, nothing. Most of the events that we've seen are what you'd expect, as I described before, which are these localized skin reactions, stinging, erosions, burning, redness. And a minority of the effects have been things that you might expect to happen: colds, flu, a gentleman who had heart palpitations when he came into the trial. All of these, however, have been unrelated to treatment. And we've had none of the side effects that I've listed on a previous slide that you would expect to see with isotretinoin. We haven't had any of them. So no dry mouth, no dry mucous membranes, really nothing else that you would have expected with isotretinoin to happen. So the only thing we've seen are these skin reactions. We haven't had any major side effects like hospitalizations, deaths, cancer, heart attacks, anything like that. Nobody has ended up, in an emergency situation. And even in the most intense treatment, the part where everybody is taking it for twice a day, every day, for 2 weeks, over that 12-week period, about 45% of those subjects also have no adverse events. No skin problems, nothing else. 2/3 of the events that do happen are these skin reactions, burning, stinging, and such, which usually resolves. And about 1/3 have been events that you just expect, like stomach flu. And again, even in the most severe subjects who got the highest doses, we've had no major serious side effects identified with the drug. And so this first patient testimonial may be familiar to you. Chris was kind enough to put it on the website in the newsletter, I believe in October. This is a gentleman from Texas with, I think, with X-linked ichthyosis. And you can read it on the website. You can read it here. It works for the first time, going to the 4th paragraph. The disease that has largely defined my life is gone. The scales are gone. Worrying about covering up is gone. This gentleman can sweat. His skin can breathe. He applies it twice a day. And you can see that the word miracle, magic is used quite a bit. I think I'll probably stop there because one of our testimonials is from our friend Aditya, who's actually on the call and can give his own story. So I'll just sort of stop there, and then hopefully we'll have time for questions or anything else you want to talk about.
And I just wanted to mention to everybody, if somebody has a question after Aditya speaks, that you can just unmute yourself so we can hear you, okay?
Should I go ahead then, Dr. Mendelson?
Oh, please.
Yeah, so thank you so much, Dr. Mendelson and Jess and Christine, for inviting me to this webinar. It's really remarkable to see the data as it progressed through the story from the phase 1 and phase 2 trials that I was part of. I was part of the phase 2B trial, as well as the open label arm for the phase 3 trial as well. But just a little overview. My name is Aditya. I'm a MD PhD student at Rutgers, New Jersey Medical School. I'm currently in the last year of my medical training, having done my PhD in immunology and liver cancer. And I really fell in love with this trial because, just like this testimonial, I think the fact that I was in the 0.1% in the phase 2B, it was remarkable. Both my wife and my family were all very observant to the dramatic difference that my skin showed from the beginning of the trial to the end. And even when I was wearing shorts, they were saying that, oh my God, your skin's so improved. And for me, it's more than just kind of their validation. Just waking up and feeling itchy in the morning before going into the shower, or coming out of the shower and feeling like, oh my God, my body is immediately drying up. It was incredible to see that at the end of the trial, that all these symptoms that I was dealing with for the majority of my life were kind of not a factor anymore. So really, I'm thankful to have an opportunity. And I think later on in my life, I really am interested in working with clinical trials as a pathologist and serving as a liaison between patients, having been a participant in clinical trials myself. So thank you so much.
Aditya, I was going to ask you too, because since research is pretty new to our whole community, I was just wondering, I mean, obviously you come from a medical background, so you probably knew what clinical trials were about, but is there anything you can share with the people on the call just to say, you know, something maybe you didn't expect or something that you did expect, any surprises?
For sure. So I think when I first started the clinical trial, I actually did take a class during my graduate training in clinical trial execution and management. And I think I kind of knew the consenting process and what I might be able to expect when I was starting the trial. But it was really a kind of exhilarating feeling to see how smooth it was. I think Timber Pharmaceuticals did a great job of being able to walk me through the process from like the email phase when I was expressing my interest to the initial consenting process, and every step of the way checking in to see how I was doing. And it was really nice to see everything that I was learning being actually how things are done in the real world.
Does anybody on the call have any questions, whether it's for Alan, Jess, Aditya?
Yeah, I have a lot of questions from the West Coast. I'm Les Avakian. I have X-linked. I'm from Fresno, California. I participated in the Stanford study. Initially, I called Timber to find out more about the study. I spoke with Joe Lucchese and Stephanie Prince, and he recommended, because I have X-linked, give it a try. So I called up to Stanford, spoke with Thomas Buschbacher, the program director for clinical studies. And he said, come on up. So I went up March 23rd, and we had our initial meeting. He showed me all the paperwork, the consent paperwork that I had to sign. They scheduled a blood draw to send to GeneDx for confirmation of X-linked. And we got that back. I started my first application on May 4th. And it was just one application a day, and it worked very fine. On May 26th, I started double applications, morning and night. And my body kind of reacted to it. About 5 days later, I went up for my next appointment. It was June 1st. Dr. Teng put me on hydrocortisone and Cetaphil. We did that for about 2 weeks, and then my body adapted very well to it, and I didn't need Cetaphil or hydrocortisone anymore throughout the study that ended on October 19th. But my skin was completely clear. We put it on, I documented just about everything I did. Left arm, left leg, right leg, abdomen, and both feet. And my scales were perfectly clear. And we ended that October 19th. I would have loved to gone into the extended treatment, but they said they had enough people doing that, so I couldn't do that. But I applaud Dr. Mendelsohn, Timber Pharmaceuticals. You've done a great job. This is going to help a lot of our friends, people that have Lamel or CIE worldwide. This is not just the United States. It's not just First. It's Italy. It's England. Especially the older people. They've got arthritis. They have problems walking. This is going to help them. Turkey, they're taking a lot of neotigazin for vulgaris that I've communicated with. They're looking for something new, and you've come up with that, and I applaud that.
Thank you.
You know, it's actually, thank you so much, Les. Just if I wanted to say one thing, so I just remembered a story during my VA rotation. When I was at the VA hospital, there was actually a patient that came in for an unrelated concern to their medical provider, but they had visible ichthyosis on them. I'm not sure if it was vulgaris or X-linked or archy, but the provider kind of just glanced at it and said, "Oh, your skin's pretty dry." And he says, "Oh yeah, it's always been like that." But he didn't even know what it was. And it was only until after the encounter ended that I was talking to the provider, I actually have ichthyosis. That looks very similar to what I have. And she was like, "Oh, wait, tell me about that. It's been a while since I've read about that. I'm not even sure what the current treatments are available." So I think, just like Les said, I think it's going to be dramatic, the amount of people that this is probably going to help.
I have a couple
Alan, I
questions.
see that.
Sorry,
Go
somebody else
ahead.
talking? Christine?
No, I was just gonna say, when you're done, there's a question in the chat.
Yeah, I saw that.
After you're done, Alexis.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, so I have a couple questions actually. So my name is Alexis Erickson. I have a 2-year-old son. His name is Ollie. I don't know if you'll be able to see on the screen. And he had, my screen's blurred, so you can't really see. But he has lamellar. And so we've been following this study very, very closely. The 2 questions I have today are, the first one, you guys may or may not be able to answer, and I don't know how many people on this call are even aware of it, but you were going to merge with Leo Pharmaceuticals, and then the merger got shot down, and then you claimed Chapter 11. I don't need to know anything about the business aspect, but I'm just curious of how all that may affect this study in the long run.
I'll give my opinion and then I'll let Jess give her opinion.
Sure.
If anything, there is absolutely no chance that this study will not finish. 0 chance, and there is 0 chance that if it works, this drug will not make it to market.
Okay. That's really all I need to know.
That's everything you said, Mrs. Erickson, is 100% correct. There is a lot of interest by, as you said, with Leo. What happened. It was a business choice by the stockholders because we are a public company. But I can guarantee you with nearly 100% certainty that this trial will finish. If anything, we are expanded. We initially were going to do 95 patients, and now we've expanded the trial, and Jess can hopefully comment on this, to 120 patients. So that's because, the powers that be are more interested in us treating more patients. There has been some talk in fact, for patients who've been in the trial, that starting sometime next year, again, this is just talking phase, we don't have this guaranteed, but that anybody who's been in the trial could then re-register and get the drug in a separate trial, guaranteed get the drug for at least a year, if not 2 years, additionally, before the drug even made it to market.
Okay.
So, that is, something that certainly people are interested in. But Jess, why don't you give your opinion? much more involved in the operational stuff than I am.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think, Alan, I think you put it exactly correctly, right? So the reality is that the path that this drug is taking is not the path that we had laid out for it, let's say, from a business side of things. But there is so much commitment to ensuring that this trial is fully funded, which it is, through to completion, as well as getting it to market. So I'll kind of bridge that statement with the question from Mr. Simons regarding the timelines and so forth to put this in a better perspective, which, as Alan indicated earlier, we actually had our 91st patient join the study today, which is very exciting for us. So we're looking for about 20-25 more individuals. We have 15 that we know of that have already reached out to physicians to express their initial interest. And as Leslie indicated, there's a lot of times where there's a clinical diagnosis of uricthiosis and a subtype without a genetic confirmation. And in some cases, that ends up not actually being what the physician thought, right? So we've had a number of patients who have said, oh, my clinician thinks I have X-linked, or I have, lamellar type, or I'm definitely TGM1. And they get genetically tested to come back to find out in some cases they have CIE, they have vulgaris, they have, so we continue to run the study until we identify all of the patients that we need to, have the statistical basis with which to be able to say we have all the data that we need to submit to the FDA. So right now, what we're anticipating is that in early 2024, so January, February, maybe early March, we will have all of our participating subjects in the study. And so as it's a 6-month treatment period. And so essentially what we're talking about is having all of the data from all of the clinical trials, right? The other 2 studies that Alan talked about, as well as the ongoing studies, available for a NDA filing or a new drug application to the FDA around March of 2025. Okay. And then what happens is, because this drug was afforded certain criteria from the FDA, including fast track designation and breakthrough therapy, it means that their time that they spend in reviewing the new drug application could be shortened, right? It could be what's called a priority review, which means it's roughly about a 6-month period as opposed to 9 or more months. So we're hoping that we would be actually, ready to have what's called a PDUFA around September of 2025, and then the launch would happen just thereafter, provided that everything, works in our favor as we were expecting. So, so we are, I'll call it December right now, a few days shy, at least a few days shy of December of 2023. And so we're hoping that in 2 years' time, this will be available. That's the goal right now. Still seems like a long time away. And Ms. Erickson, I understand you said your son is 2. So depending on what the label will read for this particular compound, it likely would be for 6 and up at that point. But you're inching ever closer, and you can continue to track the work. Obviously we recognize as a congenital disease that there might be future work for TMB-001 to understand how we can best treat our youngest patients, from newborn through age 6, as well as the other body parts that Alan had referred to earlier on the hands and the face, recognizing, the additional need that we would have in that space as well. So hopefully, Mr. Simons, that answers the question as well.
Thank you, Jess, for answering and getting to my question, and for the information, and thank you, Doctor, for the presentation. Just to, I guess, as a follow-up, just to confirm, so even during that 2-year period, participants would have the opportunity to still get the drug for a year, I guess, or more, while waiting for the approval process?
Yeah, we're currently exploring an opportunity, right? And so that's something that we've always wanted to be able to provide to our study participants. And we are in active negotiations right now to make that happen. So I can't promise that that is going to happen, but we are actively researching and trying to develop a protocol essentially that would allow for that to happen until the time that the drug is available.
Like an extension, open label extension study? Is that?
Similar, it would actually be called a post-trial access program.
Okay.
But they all kind of, the names kind of tend to.
Yeah, I've heard, different things where you can essentially have access to a drug outside of a clinical trial as well. So I'm not sure if that would come into play or if that would be an option, but
Yeah, so, a lot of times, and I'll just speak to my history, because a lot of the work that I've done prior to working with Timber for the last 4 years has been in oncology research. And so, in many cases, when there are life-threatening type diseases, there can be petitions for use outside of the context of a clinical trial. So there are a number of avenues that can be explored with the regulatory agencies. And so that's really where we are right now at Timber. We're really researching and trying to identify what the most practical way forward is to afford all of our study participants who would like to continue using the TMB-001 to be able to do so.
great. Thank you.
Yeah.
And what we can tell you is the FDA, based on our interactions so far, and I've been in doing clinical trials now for 23 years or so. This is the most receptive I've ever seen the FDA in terms of allowing us to do things that, they've never let us do. So for example, if you were to ask me, do we have any data on does this drug work in 6-year-olds? The answer is no. The FDA said, that's okay. You can study it in 6-year-olds. You can study it in 2-year-olds. You can study it in 3-year-olds, whatever you want to do. We think it works. They don't say that we think it works, but what you've shown us tends to say that it's got a pretty good chance of working and there aren't any major safety side effects. I can tell you we had an external data safety monitoring board, and the members of the board, one is the chair of pediatric dermatology at Boston Children's Hospital, and one is the chair of pediatric dermatology at Texas Children's Hospital. We had the meeting last week. They've reviewed all of the unblinded data. So they've seen all the safety, they've seen the efficacy to this point, and they recommended no changes to the trial. They didn't see any safety concerns. So these are people who actually know the answer, and they're saying, just keep going. So that's what we're going to do. I think that, we're keeping our fingers crossed, and hopefully we'll have some data to share from this phase 3 program. Again, hopefully sometime in the first quarter of 2024. So we'll be able to tell you, does the drug work? And how well does it work, for example, in particular, lamellar genotypes? So you probably know there are very common ones like TGM1, but there are other forms like ALOX E3 and ALOX 12B and ABCA12 and PNLP1. And we will have data on a lot of them. Very interesting data. So we'll be able to say, yeah, this works 100% of the time. This works 50% of the time. It works 75% of the time. Doesn't work at all. So we'll hopefully have some really important answers at the beginning of next year.
Great. Thank
So
you.
tell me, in the patients going forward, is it also still half of them with the vehicle and half with the real thing?
So it's not exactly 50-50.
Okay.
So how I can explain this. So a double-blind study is essentially the gold star standard, right? It provides everyone with a unbiased, unfiltered evaluation. So the way that our study is designed, it is actually a 2-to-1 randomization, not a 1-to-1. So for every 2 patients that get the active drug, 1 is getting the vehicle. So it's not 50-50, it's closer to 66-33.
Right.
However, for all patients entering from this point forward, the first 12 weeks is that double blind period. Okay. So a third of the patients will get vehicle only, where 2/3 will get the active drug. At the end of 12 weeks, if the patients that were initially assigned to receive the vehicle only have seen no decrease in their scaling, their fissuring, their overall symptoms, they will essentially cross over and receive the active drug for an additional for 12 weeks. Whereas patients who were on the active drug to begin with and saw it working for them will continue to get an additional 12 weeks. So everyone in the study could get at least 12 weeks, but could get up to 24 weeks,
Okay.
depending on, how you were initially randomized. Yeah.
Okay, so where do I call?
Right. So
I'll send it. Oh, I was going to say, Jess, I
Mrs.
could
Jones, you
send
can go back to
everybody on
Dr.
this.
Paller. Dr. Paller is one of our sites.
So, well, if you're in Chicago or near to Chicago, you can see Dr. Paller. You can email me directly, or Christine can set you up and she can and depending on wherever you live in the country, we can tell you where the closest site is to you. We can also just tell you where all the sites are in case you have a grandchild or a best friend who lives across the country and you want to go visit 3 to 4 times in the next 4
Just
months.
one quick question. Anywhere near Kansas City? No.
Kansas City.
I think Chicago is probably the
Chicago
closest.
probably would be the closest.
Right, but we pay for all the transport. So if you fly, we pay for the flights. We pay for the hotels.
Okay.
We pay for your meals.
All right.
I saw there's also a Mississippi location, maybe.
There
We do
is a
have Mississippi.
University of Mississippi.
Okay.
We have, we have a site in Minnesota. Is that close to Kansas City? I apologize for my ignorance.
It's like Chicago and then Minnesota, Mississippi.
Mississippi. Yeah, as I said, most of our sites are sort of on this side of the Mississippi River.
Okay.
We have sites in California, Seattle, Arizona.
Denver, Colorado.
Yeah, I did see a map at one point. Yes.
Yeah.
Two sites in Texas. But as Jess said, if you want to go to California, you want to go to Miami, you have a site in Miami you can go to. Get out of the cold weather.
Do you have any old people like me?
Our oldest so far is 80.
Oh, I'm close. Okay. All right.
There is another question in the chat here. Are there any plans to extend the study? Oh, Phyllis, do you want to unmute yourself?
So
we can't hear you.
Yeah,
Phyllis.
as she's trying to
Hi.
talk.
Hi, this
There
is
she
Sophie.
is.
I'm from
Yes.
Belgium.
Yeah.
The question is mine. So I was wondering if there are any plans to extend the study to like Belgium or any area nearby Belgium. I think there is already something going on in France, but not
Yes.
100% sure.
Yes, so we do have trial sites in France, Germany, and Italy. So France likely would be closest for someone living in Belgium. We have 4 centers in France throughout the country. One in Toulouse, one in Paris. I'm going to block the other 2 cities, but I can certainly, Sophie, I can get Chris those the names of the cities. Unfortunately, we will not be opening the study in Belgium. But our physicians that are in those other countries in the EU are open to having patients come in from other countries. They'll talk to you over the phone about it first if you're interested. And as Alan mentioned, we do pay for travel. So if you would have to take a rail or anything like that, we would be able to cover that. So those are the 3 countries that we are in Europe for this study.
All right, thank you very much. I have one more small question, if that's okay.
Of course.
It's 2:30 a.m. here, so I'm sorry, it's really early. I sound a bit tired, but I really wanted to join. So the first weeks that you have to participate and use this cream, let's say, we are not allowed to use our own cream, I suppose, because my condition is quite severe. So I don't know how I would be doing without any cream at all.
Sure. That's a great question. And it's one that we get a lot. So there are a number of different things that can be done as it relates to this. So the purest answer is yes. In order to ensure that any changes that we would see in your skin are solely due to our drug, you do need to stop, or what's called wash out, from any agents that you are currently using. However, the caveat to that, or the exception to that, is, as Dr. Mendelsohn was explaining earlier, this study is looking for study participants that have anywhere, that are going to treat anywhere between 10 and 90% of their total body surface area. So what that means is you could have a conversation with the physician and say, my condition is so severe, I am not comfortable stopping some of the other treatment that I use on my body, on my skin, for my face, my arms, my chest, but I'm willing to try this on my legs and feet. And I can stop using the different treatments that I typically would use. But I can do it only on this part of my body. And that would be completely acceptable, right? So you could continue treating the other parts of your body while still on the study for other parts of your body. And so the whole way in which we design this is that there is a kind of, I'll call it a continuum of when you need to wash out of different agents. So up until the day that you start the study, you can still use emollients. So, an Aquaphor, a Cetaphil, things of that nature. But then you would have to stop in the treatment area. So that way there would be no what's called a confounding factor. So that way we would know for sure, is it our drug working, or was it the other medicine that you were using that's working?
I have a question. First of all, I want to thank you so very much. The study was remarkable. Going off of it was horrendous and very, very upsetting because you had all these extra samples that I was told were getting thrown out. And to me, it was like having someone starving next to you and throwing out the food that you had that was not being used. So
I'm so sorry.
Just want to let you know emotionally how that affects people after 3 months when you see such a change and then it goes back to where it was. But I want to thank you for the study. I mean, after all these years to finally have something that I feel really, really made such a difference, an amazing, amazing difference. You did mention though that there was a way that we could pre-register for a post thing in order to get the lotion. At what point would that be taking place?
Sure, no problem. So what will happen is, provided that we are able to reach an agreement with the FDA, that they believe that this is the appropriate thing to do forward, we will probably know, I'm going to say roughly in the February timeframe of next year.
Okay.
A notification will go out to all of the study physicians to let them know that this is now something that we are going to start to do. And they will be asked to reach out to all of their participants. Now, if for some reason you do not get a notification, you can read. No. I'm just saying, if by chance it's now March or April and you're saying, I've not heard anything, feel free to email me. I actually put it's trials@timberpharma.com. So TRIALS, trials@timberpharma.com. It'll come to me. You can say, I was part of your study. I'm interested in that additional access. I haven't heard from my physician yet. My hope is that everyone will hear. I don't see a reason why you wouldn't. So we are still very actively pursuing this. So I just want to be clear. I cannot promise that that's going to happen, but we are working very hard to make sure that it does.
Okay, I appreciate that. Good to have an end date. As I approach my end date in life, I would like
Oh,
to get some
Oh,
prior to that, but I'm so encouraged by the trial and the ability for younger people to have that option and treatment. It's just going to make a world of difference for their lives.
Ms.
Physical,
Tillman, did you have a lot of skin reaction problems or anything else?
no, I had absolutely no reaction to the study, other than positive reaction. There were no side effects whatsoever.
Didn't burn, didn't.
Nothing whatsoever.
Yeah,
And
so you're one of the lucky 60%.
yeah, they said they didn't know if I had the quote placebo and the vessel, whatever. And I go, well, if it's the placebo, why don't you give me what's left over? Because it's a placebo and it's working. But you're saying it's a 2-to-1 ratio. In all likelihood, they said it would take a few weeks to show the improvement within 2 days. And they also said stop putting lotion on for a week before, and I just use Albaline cream on my skin. And I was worried, how am I going to manage without putting it on? And I've been putting it on daily, multiple times my entire life. So I actually stopped a month before the study. So I may have had more of a buildup of scales prior to it. But within 2 days, my husband was blown away by how much improvement there was. So I thank you for that. And it was my dermatologist that read the study, and he called me up before 8 a.m. He said, I read this study. I literally fell off the chair thinking of you, and you need to contact Dr. Munich immediately because you'd be a great candidate. So my heart goes, my appreciation to Dr. Schneiderman, who recommended me, and to all of you who've put so much work and effort and compassion into what you've developed for us. Thank you.
well, I think we should turn it around and say thank you to everyone that's participated, because that's how research gets advanced.
yes.
It wouldn't go anywhere without the participants. So thank you guys.
Can I ask another question?
There is another, oh, go ahead. I'm sorry. Yes, and
If
Alexis has a
anything to
question.
That's
get
okay.
more
Go ahead.
candid, just let me know. Okay, I'll be your poster child or adult or
Thanks,
older lady,
Alice.
whatever.
Thank you. Do you want Samuel first and then Alexis next?
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to make sure I heard something right, and I think it was Jessica that was speaking at the time. So if a patient or participant is you mentioned the retinoid washout. If a patient or participant is on oral retinoids, so not applying lotion locally, but an oral systemic retinoid, and still has severe scaling, can they still participate in the timber study and just do like a trial or test on a certain area and continue to take their oral retinoid throughout the study? Did I hear that correctly?
Yeah, unfortunately, no. So any systemic treatment, right? So Soriatane, for instance, has a 3-month washout, so you would have to stop it for at least 3 months before you would be able to start the study. And any other oral agent as well would have to be stopped because we have no way of then identifying if the effects are seen. Now, I hear what you're saying, and you can say, I've been on this, or someone's been on this for 3 years and still look at the scaling.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, this study is not looking at what would be considered a combo. It's something that we could certainly pursue in the future, but the cleanest way to run this research for the purposes of first submission for a new drug application is to have it completely by itself. Right. So that's why. So there is a continuum, so to speak, of washouts that says the most those that have the biggest effect and stay in the body the longest, such as your systemics, has to stop first, right? Then your other agents like a keratolytic or other things, they will start having shorter and shorter periods of washout up until the day that you start the study.
So if a patient wanted to do it in combination, like you said, it would have to be after approval, or could.
Yeah.
Okay.
How long is the washout for acitretin?
I think it's about a year, isn't it, Jess?
For an oral yes.
Really?
It's because it stays in your body.
Oh, I know it does.
Yeah.
Yeah, acitretin stays in your body. It gets stored in the fat tissue. We all have
I
fat
got
tissue.
plenty of that.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. Acitretin is only 3 months, Alan.
Oh, I'm
Sorry,
sorry.
I just pulled up the
Oh,
protocol.
I'm
No, you're
right. I was
fine.
thinking isotretinoin is a year.
Correct. So acitretin is a 3-month washout.
Oh, okay. Yeah, but it does stay forever in your body.
Right.
It does.
Right.
It
I
does.
apologize.
That's why I can't walk.
Thank you for correcting me, Jess. You're
No,
right.
it's fine. That's why I wanted to
Yeah.
always have the
So,
protocol handy.
like, it's because, again, the main reason for that concern is what I brought up earlier, which has to do with pregnancy, is that for pregnant women, women who want to get pregnant, you have to worry for those 2 or 3 years, since it's mandatory in the trial that if you're of childbearing age, you have to go on birth control or promise you're not going to get pregnant. You don't have to stay, you don't have to wash out of acitretin for 2 or 3 years because the worry about getting pregnant and birth defects is gone. The reason for the isotretinoin for a year, in fact, was not a scientific issue. It was the FDA required us to do that because they wanted to make absolutely sure, to your question, Mr. Simmons, that there was no isotretinoin in the body anywhere close to confound the data that Jess was talking about. And if you, again, one of the other things, if you're interested, if I went too fast and you want to get the details on the phase 3 trial, you can go to the website. It's ichthyosistrial.com. And that has outlined by Jess and Anum and Brenda in our operations group, all the different parts of the trial and the washout and how long you have to be off of things. And that'll give you a lot more information that you can read on your own time.
All right.
Ichthyosistrial.com.
Yes, thank you.
Great. Thank you.
So I know we probably wanted to try to keep this to an hour because it's, at least 9 o'clock here on the East Coast. I don't know where everybody's located. I'm in Charlotte, North Carolina. When I gave birth to my son 2 years ago, he spent some time in a local children's hospital here in Charlotte and then was transferred to Duke, where he was under the care of Dr. Neil Prose, who I'm sure a lot of you probably know. He had since retired, and we had heard about the trial that you guys were doing, and that Wake Forest was going to be a trial site. And so we switched his dermatology from Duke to Wake Forest, and his pediatric dermatologist that he sees there, Dr. Jerizo, I think I'm saying that correctly. Yep. He used the word miracle and magic, in just the same way that that testimonial did that you showed us. So it's very encouraging. But my last final 2 questions, and they might not be questions you can answer, but just I feel like with this opportunity, I have to ask them. Number 1, do you know what a maintenance treatment schedule would look like? I know a lot of what you're doing is in the very initial stages of that, but this is clearly a chronic condition that people deal with for their entire lives. So I'm just curious, you have 2 applications, 3 applications in some situations. Do you have any idea what a maintenance treatment schedule would look like? And then any idea about what the cost might be?
The maintenance schedule per the trial will either be twice a day or once a day.
Okay.
There may very well be patients who take it once a day, just apply it once a day. In the real world, when you go to Dr. Jerizo or you go to Dr. Paller or you go to any of the sites, they may say, you know what? You look pretty good. You can put it on 2 or 3 times a week. Try that. Just once a day, 2 or 3 times a week. that won't be in the label. That's up to any physician who has a labeled drug to decide how often to give it.
Sure.
Because, and then to answer your other question, because it will be FDA approved, there is an excellent chance that the vast majority of insurance companies will cover it, commercial insurance companies.
Even Medicare?
Probably, state and federal things, Medicare, Medicaid will most probably cover it. Medicaid might take a little bit longer just because it's, it's not for us, it's for something else. The difference right now is that almost by law, if the FDA approves a drug, the insurance companies have to cover it. Will they try to get away with things to try to give you as little as possible? That I can't tell you. That's up to the insurance company. But
Now that's if it's written for what the label says, right? Because if it's written off label, like some of these other retinoids that are, then, a lot of times people are fighting with insurance company to pay for those for something that's not acne,
Correct.
and so that's, yeah.
This will be actually approved.
Right.
And it will be, in fact, the only treatment in the United States that is approved for congenital ichthyosis. And as I mentioned earlier, the only other option in Europe is oral acitretin. That's the only drug that's been approved. And that wasn't even approved based on a clinical trial. It's just because, again, there were no other drugs available. And so whatever anecdotal evidence they had, the European health authorities said, yeah, okay, well, now at least we can approve this. It is not, acitretin in Europe has not gone through the rigorous program that Jess and I have described. And so whether in Europe, this will change the dynamic and payers will pay for this in Europe, I can't tell you with 100% certainty, but the chances are far better that doctors will not have to argue with the insurance companies in terms of getting it. They may have to argue with, for example, the number of tubes you're going to get, or they will allow you to have. But they really will not be able to stand in your way of getting it because it's the only treatment that is approved by the government. And so, and that's true for Medicare, is pretty much if Medicare approves things, the private insurers pay for it as well. The only one in the air is Medicaid, and they usually pay, but it takes them a while. And so regardless, if this gets to market, we've already started discussions internally and with other people on how to make sure that patients who need it will have access to it and that it won't break your bank.
Thank you.
There's one last question in the chat, and then I guess we'll wrap up from here. This one says, this is from Kim. I have a 24-year-old son with X-linked.
I responded to her directly.
Oh, you already did that one?
Yep.
Oh, you did. Okay. No problem.
Again, it's
I guess that would.
From what we've seen, there's a limited amount of risk, a lot of benefit, doesn't get absorbed, no side effects. Seems to work, but we'll have the final answer next year.
Good work.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much,
Good work.
everybody, for participating. This was very, very interesting, and I hope you got your questions answered. Please, if you have any questions, if you have my email, cwassel@firstskinfoundation.org or directly to Jess. Either way, we'll get you some answers.
Absolutely.
All right.
It was a
Thank
great.
you all
Everybody
very
have
much.
a great night, and thanks again.
Be
Thank
well.
you very much.
All righty.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Take care.